It's been a long time coming, but it is finally time to get the Belleville Sens podcast off the ground. 36 games in, halfway through the 2022-23 American Hockey League season, and what better time to start getting you up to date week by week on how things have been going with the Sens. We'll introduce you to some of the folks around the office here for the first 10 or 12 episodes at least, and a whole lot more interviews, some trivia perhaps. Really, Joel Vanderlaan, the book is wide open with what we do with this weekly show. So we're glad to have all those listeners along, and hopefully we can provide a little bit more insight and in-depth information on the club.
Yeah, and it's really exciting that we kind of have a blank canvas here, and we can kind of take this in any direction we see fit. And like you mentioned, kind of give a more in-depth look to the Senators fans of what's going on around the organization, and kind of let the players' personalities shine through the front office, kind of get to know them as well. Maybe you don't see them at the forefront as much, but they do a lot of important work.
Yeah, we'll start right now, but because this is a blank canvas and we're always looking for feedback, you can reach out to us if you like what you've heard on this first episode. If you want to hear something different, something more, you can reach out to us at info@BellevilleSens.com or through any of our social media channels at Belleville Sens. We're always open to feedback here at the Belleville Senators, and specifically in this case, the Belleville Sens podcast. My name's David Foote, Joel Vanderlaan, as we introduced as well, here with you too, and we're going to start off every show by recapping the last week of action around the team, and not a great week for the Belleville Sens, coming off of a pretty good week. 3 wins in a row a couple weeks ago, and now last week a pair of losses to Cleveland and Manitoba. Let's start with the Friday game against Cleveland. Joel, that 3-game win streak comes to an end, and overall not completely and utterly exciting hockey game, really, as the Sens fall 2-1, and one of the more low-scoring affairs that we've seen this year.
Yeah, and especially like you mentioned, coming off such a high in the week past, and they got 32 shots on net on Pavel Cajon, who made 32 saves, and Josh Dunn kind of led the way for the Monsters, scoring twice. But like you mentioned, kind of a slow burn to that game. The Monsters kind of trapping them out as well, kind of wanting to play to their identity. Scott Sabrin was lucky enough to kind of hit the scoreboard again as he continues his strong play as he collected his 12th of the season. But like you mentioned, just not overly an exciting game, low-scoring game, kind of Monsters kind of dictated a little bit how they wanted the game to go, and ended up with a win.
And with the stretch the team's been on, it's been busy. If you haven't been following along, basically running on a 3-game-a-week schedule for the last probably month and a half, and this was one of those weeks where there was only 2 games, Friday and Saturday, and we talked with head coach Troy Mann throughout the week about how that might impact things. And from where we sit upstairs, it certainly to me seemed like the guys were a little bit out of rhythm come the weekend, and I think that carried right through to Saturday as well.
Yeah, and I think we're learning too as we kind of go through the season. It's such habitual kind of, guys have their habits, right? Mm-hmm. They want to know when they're playing. If they're playing every Wednesday, they want to keep playing every Wednesday. And Troy said they tried to mimic it with a harder practice on Thursday, to try to kind of get the guys in game speed, but it seemed to kind of not
work.
Yeah, not work, I guess is the simplest way to put it. But yeah, like you mentioned, they're so structured down there with their schedule, and that could be one of the reasons why they came out a little bit slow on Friday night.
Saturday, much the same against the Manitoba Moose, a team that just plays so well defensively. And if you listen to the broadcast on the Belleville Sens Entertainment Network, that was something that Brock Ormond and I talked about throughout the course of the game, and something that really worked in Manitoba's advantage. They're just a team that stacks up at the blue line. They force you to make a decision, and if you make the wrong one, you're going to lose the puck, and they're going to be back the other way. And as well as the Sens played defensively on Saturday, Manitoba able to find a couple of holes in the armor of Mads Søgaard en route to a 4-2 win.
Yeah, and you're not going to win too many games when you only take 16 shots on net.
Yeah.
And
I buried the lead. Yeah, it was a season-low 16 shots on goal.
And to the Belleville Senators' credit, very resilient club as we've seen this year, and they kind of got going late in the third. Angus Crookshank scored. Ridley Gregg continues his impressive season, also finding the back of the net. But like you mentioned, the structure of the Manitoba Moose dictated the game from the onset, and not a particularly bad game from the Belleville Senators, just couldn't really get anything going, and that's tough to kind of, when you're looking after Friday night to get going and have kind of another slower start, slower burn type of game. I know Troy is going to have the guys right. Busy week coming up against some really good competition. So, it was a difficult week, and the Belleville Senators coming off such an impressive week the week before, finding the back of the net in bunches, kind of have to go back to the drawing board now.
We will, of course, get to what's coming up this week a little bit later on this first episode of the Belleville Sens podcast. David Foote and Joel Vanderlaan here. Our first Get to Know Your FO or front office segment coming up later on as well with Alex Smith, who, again, if you listen to the broadcast, you'll be familiar with him because we shout him out all the time for his social media work on the Belleville Sens social media accounts at Belleville Sens. So he'll be with us later on as well. Mentioned right off the top, we're 36 games in now. With those 2 losses last week, Belleville sits in the bottom half of the division, sitting in 5th place right now. Still on that playoff cut line, which is good news. And these games, as fast as the first 36 went, the next 36 are going to go faster, and the games are only going to get more important. That's also part of why we decided to launch the show right now, to build that hype and get some people on the B-Sens train as they push towards another playoff appearance. But maybe in a general sense, Joel, how is this year kind of stacked up to what you expected at the start of the season? On paper, this team was pretty good at the start of the year, and then they've just been blasted with injuries and the regular call-ups to Ottawa and just some runs of poor play as every team goes through. But how is this year stacked up to maybe what you expected coming in?
I think generally it's kind of how you expected it to go, especially with the North Division. It's always so tight. When you kind of look at the rosters at the beginning of the year and you see the defense that Belleville was able to kind of bring in this season and the depth of the blue line, and I think that when the guys are down and not in Ottawa, that's been a strength, especially when Jacob Bernard-Docker's been down, Dylan Hetherington, their captain. But I think overall it's kind of been hard to get a true picture of what this team is going to be, just due to the sheer amount of injuries, recalls they've had. Goalie injuries have been a big talking point early in the season. Matt Sogard seems to be healthy now, playing well. So I think if the team can get to a spot where they're starting to kind of find their rhythm now, their goaltending's been solidified, their defense has kind of come in and been solidified. Now it's just kind of the missing piece of, let's get the offense solidified now. Let's get Roby back in the lineup. Let's get Jace Howerlock back in the lineup. Victor Lodin for a continued stretch. I think they'll be fine. They've kind of survived to this point. They're in a playoff spot at the midway point, which is encouraging to see, albeit very, very tight with Laval and Cleveland. Only 2. Laval's tied points-wise, and now Cleveland's a point back. So very, very tight, going to come down to the end like it always does in the North Division. But I think the encouraging signs are when they have been healthy for stretches, they've been very good.
And beating the top teams in the division. They beat the Toronto Marlies a few times this season. They beat the Rochester Americans. They've beaten the Utica Comets. Like, they've beaten everybody. It's just a matter of getting the form to be consistent. And like you said, those injuries, I think, healing up will go a long way. Again, if you haven't been following along too closely, Joel mentioned Jace Howerluck and Victor Lodin. They've kind of been in and out with injuries throughout the course of the season. Some of the more longer-term ones now are Roby Yarvente, who's in a crucial year for him, 3rd year as a pro, and coming off of the Summer World Juniors where he played pretty well. He got hurt back in Rockford and has missed 27 games now because of that, and this is a guy who is really going to be relied upon to provide some offensive punch up front. Same with Philippe Daou, who's not as experienced professionally as Roby Yarvente, but was going to come into his first full pro season off a Memorial Cup win and was off to a good start. Now he's missed 18 games. He's done for the season with shoulder surgery coming. And then Lassie Thompson is probably the last big name who was out, a defenseman, but still a guy who adds a little bit of offensive punch and certainly will help on the power play. Matt Wedman, depth forward. Brendan Saulnier, depth forward, also still out. Saulnier should come back hopefully within the next week or so, but that's just a handful of what the Sens have been dealing with, not to mention your reigning MVP, Jake Lucchini, got, I don't want to say an unexpected call-up to the National Hockey League, but I don't think there was a lot of people who would have expected Jake Lucchini to be up, especially for as long as he has been. Rourke Chartier, again, big piece of the offense, is up there and now hurt in Ottawa. It really has been a difficult season for Troy Mann and his staff to have to wade through all these roster moves, and I think all things considered to be, just a few points back of second place, and I guess 11 points back now, but to be still in the mix, I suppose, is pretty impressive still.
Yeah, and I think that, like you mentioned, is a big credit to Troy Mann, his staff, and we see them day in and day out, always working, kind of honing their craft, helping these guys to be put in the best position possible. Like you mentioned, Jake Lucchini, Rourke Chartier up in Ottawa, that's a lot of your center depth gone. That's your top two-line centers. Chartier, 14 goals in 24 games, so that's a guy that you're kind of relying on
him, yeah,
to kind of carry the load offensively. And I think too, to see some of these guys like Igor Sokolov be a point a game guy, Ridley Gregg's just under the point a game line, to see that they've been able to kind of carry the load and without those guys there to support them, I think is very impressive, and it's only going to help them when those guys return to kind of say, okay, we can do it now we get the reinforcements, let's go to work. And like you mentioned, Lassie Thompson, he offers definitely a different dynamic to that defenseman as a kind of a true puck mover. They were missing that when Jonathan Aspro was also out throughout parts of the season. So
first 25-ish games he missed, yeah.
So now you got Max Gannett, you got Lassie Thompson, you got Jonathan Aspro. Now you can start creating a little bit from the back end to go along with those shutdown guys of JBD, Hetherington, Rubens. Larson's been coming on strong lately.
Max Gannett's had an excellent season so far, helping to kind of fill that role that Lassie Thompson sort of plays, the puck mover, the power play quarterback, that sort of role.
Yeah, so I think overall it bodes well for if this team can get healthy, that you've kind of seen the depth pieces, so to speak, kind of shine through, and the younger pros kind of shine through and kind of lead the way here and make sure that things are in a spot where when these guys come back, they can push for a playoff spot.
So to sum it all up, the first half of the season has been up and down. Sens are sitting, as we mentioned, 5th of 7 in the North Division. That would qualify them for the play-in round of the playoffs, much like was the case last season. Only a couple points back of Syracuse in 4th, 7 points back of Rochester in 3rd, and then Utica and Toronto starting to pull away a little bit, but as we know, and with all the divisional play in the American Hockey League, anything can happen, and even that gap up to Toronto technically could shrink if the Marlies go on the schneid and the Senators get hot. So lots can happen in the next 36 games, which continues on Wednesday night. The Toronto Marlies are here at CAA Arena Wednesday and Friday for a couple of games. The Hershey Bears are here Saturday. If you're interested in getting to the game, you can head to Ticketmaster.ca for single-game seats, or my recommendation is to head to BellevilleSens.com and check the promo offers, because there are lots of good ones to get you the best bang for your buck if you're planning to head to CAA Arena to take in a Belleville Sens game. Here are the statistical leaders through 36 games for Belleville. Rourke Chartier among the team leaders in goals with 14. Igor Sokolov, 25 assists and 36 points. Chartier's got 7 power play goals. Cole Reinhardt and Ridley Gregg each have a pair of shorthanded goals. Jacob Bernard-Docker, who was just recalled to Ottawa again, has the best plus-minus on the team at +6. Antoine Bibeau, the most wins in net with 6. Mads Sogard's getting close, right behind him. Sogi has the best GAA and save percentage among the 3 goaltenders on the roster at .302 and .904 respectively. And again, those team statistical races are pretty tight as well, because we've got a lot of guys who are having good campaigns here through 36 games, again, despite the mixed results on the ice. Transaction-wise, mentioned Jacob Bernard-Docker recalled to Ottawa. Chad Yetman was released from a PTO, and Alex Breton released from the PTO last week too, as well as an ECHL trade that kind of affects the Belleville Sens. Logan Flodell, who's on a two-way ECHL AHL deal with Belleville, traded from Allen to Norfolk, as we continue to keep an eye on what's happening in the ECHL as well. Mention that success of Igor Sokolov. He was named to the AHL All-Star Classic presented by Bell, and that's happening in Laval early next month, February 5th and 6th, and Igor Sokolov will make his first All-Star appearance. He'll join us in just a moment to talk about that and how his season has been going so far as we continue on in this first episode of the Belleville Sens podcast on the Belleville Sens Entertainment Network. Here with Belleville Senators All-Star Igor Sokolov. We haven't chatted since the announcement. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
What does that mean to you to get that recognition and kind of, as Troy pointed out to us, not just from your club in nominating you, but from coaches around the division who vote on that selection?
Yeah, I think it's pretty awesome. Obviously, when teams we play against, 8 to 12 times a year, and they recognize me, and they see that I'm pretty hard to play against, and yeah, I feel like it's pretty awesome. Any player who got named there, I think they feel pretty special, and yeah, I can't wait. Looking forward to that, and yeah, but now I just want to try to focus on the games here in Belleville, and try to keep going our winning streak.
Do you feel like it's kind of a testament to the work that you've been putting in here over the last 3 seasons?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said before many times, that, the hard work is going to pay off at some point. And, now we see, for me, it's paying off, naming an All-Star game and, kind of having a pretty good year in Belleville. So, yeah, I'm just trying to stay patient and control what I can.
You've been having a great season as well, and kind of setting some record marks. You set the all-time franchise lead in goals. You're close on assists and points now. What does that kind of mean to you to kind of be setting these records here?
I'm just trying to play my game, obviously, and Troy's trusting me offensively, so I think I'm just trying to do my thing out there and, try to play well without the puck. And once, it comes down to making a small play or making a skill play, I know that I can take care of that. So mostly try to focus to play without the puck.
You mentioned the team's winning streak right now. You've been playing with Ridley Gregg and Victor Lodin recently and collecting some pretty cool point streaks with them. What's it like playing with those guys?
I think pretty awesome. I think me and Ridley already played over 15 games or something. I think we kind of already built that chemistry, but with Victor, he had a pretty tough season with the injuries and stuff, but he's really underrated skill. So playing with them, the first game comeback, and he has 3 assists and all of them, pretty nice. So you see what kind of skill he has, and yeah. But I think now just we all realize how much closer we get off the ice. You try to build chemistry with one another, and yeah, it seems like we all can do anything. Ridley's not afraid to go in front of net. I'm not afraid. So is Victor, and we all kind of feel where one another and just try to make plays when we have the plays and not try to force anything.
If earlier in the season it kind of felt like teams were maybe shutting you down a little bit or focusing on you, does that open up a little bit more space playing on a line with 2 guys who are just as dangerous as you can be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have, Victor in the lineup, who's a game changer, and, we're missing Robbie as well, who can, put the puck in the net from anywhere. So I think, missing Robbie and missing Victor kind of, put a focus on me a little bit, but right now we have Lodin in the lineup on the power play, and he can rip the puck and score from anywhere. So I think it kind of opens up a little bit of space for me as well, and so is Ridley.
Couple more minutes here with the Belleville Sens All-Star Igor Sokolov. Last question for me on the All-Star game, and then we'll touch on some other stuff here generally. Skills competition is the day before. Is there an event that you're hoping to be able to take part in?
I mean, I've been pretty hot in the shootouts this year, so I'm hoping to get in a breakaway, but probably not prefer doing the fastest skater, but I could be a dark horse out there. But yeah, probably shoot the breakaways or accuracy shooting. I think it would be pretty cool as well.
And I guess former Sens captain Logan Shaw was named to the North Division team as well, so you'll get to play alongside him, which might be nice.
Yeah, that'll be pretty awesome. I think we kept it close and we skated all summer together, so yeah, it would be pretty awesome to see him and kind of play on the same team again. And yeah, I can't wait to see him and just to share that moment with him.
You've played in marquee events before. You played in the World Juniors, now the All-Star game. Do you kind of relish in kind of having the spotlight on you like that?
No, absolutely. I mean, any player wanted to play in the World Juniors, obviously, and making an All-Star team in pro level is pretty cool. So I would say it's pretty awesome, and it's just like I said before, it's awesome to see the work I put in kind of paying off. So yeah, obviously, if you ask any player if they want to be in the All-Star game or World Juniors, they're obviously going to say yes.
You've been alternating games with points. I think you've gone about 26 games without back-to-back pointless games. What's kind of led to that consistency for you?
I mean, I think from last year's kind of, Troy was mentioning, my consistency. So, yeah, so this year I just tried to focus on being consistent every game. I can be having a, 4 or 5 game, 4 or 5 point game, and then, next 3-4 you can't see me out there, right? So I'm just trying to, play every game as hard as I can, work hard, and just try to stay consistent as much as possible. So, seeing, that kind of stat, it says that, I kind of work in my consistency and, I'm happy with it.
Are those the keys to getting that eventual call up to Ottawa? And do you hear much from the folks in Ottawa about what steps might need to be taken still?
For me, I had a lot of conversations with Ben and Troy, and we've just talked control what you can, control the controllables. And, last, 10 to 12 games, I've been playing really well, and, I've been happy. Once, I think Jake and Roy kind of got called up, and obviously I'm happy for him, but it's a competition in between all of us, so that kind of gave me a little extra boost for me, try to step up because it's my third year pro. But yeah, just hearing from them that they want more consistency and playing well without the puck.
And then just from a team perspective, you mentioned the win streak. How do you keep rolling here right now on one of the hottest stretches of the season?
Yeah, I think we just got to stick with it and play the way we can play, obviously hard, check hard, and we're missing a lot of bodies, so we have a lot of guys in PTOs who are working hard and, making it hard on the coaches to, kind of cut them. So I think just, all 4 lines play the way they can, and, everybody playing their identity, and I think it's just going to pay off.
Thanks, Igor. Appreciate the time, and congrats again.
Thank you.
Reinhardt up through the middle over the logo. Hands it off on his right for Castles. Back into the slot for Sabourin, who scores! Scott Sabourin is on a 4-game point streak as he ties the game midway through the third period. It's Sabourin's 12th of the season. And a career high for Scott Sabourin in goals as he scores his 12th of the season. One of the lone bright spots from last weekend as the Sens fell to the Cleveland Monsters on Friday and then again to the Manitoba Moose on Saturday. As we continue on in this first episode of the Belleville Sens podcast, David Foote and Joel Vanderlaan here. And before we get into this week, let's talk about Scott Sabourin briefly because what a season it's been for him, already smashing the franchise record in penalty minutes in a season and the overall franchise record for penalty minutes. And as much as he has been an enforcer, he has been that protector as needed. He's also been one of the Sens' most successful offensive players this season and has really had a very strong campaign so far.
He has, and I think the big thing with him is the consistency. He's finding his way again on the scoreboard most nights now, and a big part of that identity line with Cole Reinhardt and Cole Castles, and just kind of playing the game the way that Troy Mann's kind of preaching it as well, and making sure that the team's moving in the right direction here, being a steady presence like you mentioned, and he's getting rewarded for it. He's got 12 goals in 34 games, up to 19 points now, and this team would where would they be without him, I guess, is kind of the way we have to look at it a little bit too, is that he's just been so consistent and so steady for this team, wears a letter for a reason. Good penalty killer, getting a little bit of time on the power play now as well. Always good 5-on-5. So a really positive season from Scott Sabourin, and really from a fan's perspective, a fan favorite here, and you can see why, like you mentioned, can throw him with the best of them, but also can put up some points, which is awesome to see as well.
Yeah, and they'll need Scott Sabourin to be another big piece here this week as the Sens play 3 games in 4 days Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. Wednesday and Friday against the Toronto Marlies, Saturday against the Hershey Bears. Let's start with the matchup against Toronto. Belleville 2-4 against the division-leading Marlies, who have been an absolute powerhouse since week 1 of the AHL season. We mentioned it a little bit earlier on that the Sens are capable of beating this Toronto team, but they really have to put everything together.
Yeah, and the Marlies on a 5-game winning streak coming in here to Belleville, and like you mentioned, they just can beat you in so many different ways. Their goaltending's very, very steady. They can move the puck in transition with their blue liners. Noel Hoffenmeier's having an outstanding season. And then up front, they're led by former Belleville Sens captain Logan Shaw, who will join Igor Sokolov at the All-Star Classic, and he's having a tremendous year. And their secondary scoring is, maybe their depth is as good as they come in the American Hockey League, just 3-4 lines deep. So they're going to be a handful, but like you mentioned, the Belleville Senators have been able to beat them this season.
Igor Sokolov, Scott Sabourin, and Max Gannett among the points leaders for Belleville against Toronto this season. Sokolov with 3 goals and 2 assists over 6 games. Sabourin with 2 goals, 2 assists over 6 games, and then 4 helpers for Max Gannett. It just figures, you come off a weekend where you've won 3 straight the week before. You got a couple struggling teams coming in. You figure, hey, this is going to be 4-5 in the streak. Should be no problem. Doesn't go that way, and then it's not any easier this week with 2 of the best teams in the conference coming in. I think Sens fans know a lot about the Toronto Marlies with these teams already playing 6 times this season. How about the Hershey Bears? AHL fans recognize the name. One of the longest-standing franchises in this league, team that's been able to string some wins together, and they pose some pretty big threats on both sides of the puck, offensively and defensively.
Yeah, and the Hershey Bears, like you mentioned, have the best record in the Eastern Conference, and they're led in net by Hunter Shepard, 213 goals against, average, 919 save percentage. He's a guy that's very hard to beat. He's 10-1-3 on the campaign, and then also offensively, Mark Scarbosa can score. Ethan Frank's having a very good year. You just look, and they're just deep, and I think that's kind of what the Belleville Senators haven't had this year, right? Mm-hmm. So a credit to them for being able to build this depth. Connor McMichael, a guy that prospects fans would know, very good in London. But if you look at it, I think the key with them is they're deep. And I think a lot of it has to do with everyone in this league is so good. It's just kind of finding the consistency, finding chemistry, and that's what Toronto and Hershey have been able to do this year.
The Hershey Bears, always a strong team. Troy Mann was there for majority of his career, though now he's been in Belleville just about as long as he was in Hershey. Senators' lifetime against the Bears, 2 wins, 3 losses, and a shootout loss here in Belleville, 1-2. 0-0, and again, the Sens will have to be at the top of their game this week in order to pick up some points against the Toronto Marlies and the Hershey Bears. Of course, you can stay tuned to the Belleville Sens social media throughout the course of the week. We've got all the build-up leading up to all the games, all of the pre-game info from Troy Mann, game planning, and roster info. He's always really open with us in terms of keeping us up to date with what's going on with the club, and that's, again, part of the goal here on the show is to keep everybody up to date on a week-by-week basis with what's happening. And speaking of the Belleville Sens social media, we're going to take a real quick break. When we come back, the Senators' social media we'll get his actual title from him when he comes in. Alex Smith does a lot of our graphic design and social media. He'll join us next for our first segment of Get to Know Your FO, Get to Know Your Front Office on the Belleville Sens podcast. So stay with us. Into our final segment on this first episode of the Belleville Sens podcast. David Foote, Joel Vanderlaan here, and one of the goals of this show is to try to introduce Belleville Sens fans to more than just the players. Everybody knows the guys on the ice who are out there every day with their names on their sweaters and, their stats up online, and everybody knows the players, point being. We've got a pretty small front office here that does a lot of work, and we really want to highlight the folks that keep the team going on the day-to-day and keep everything ticking along and moving. And that's brought us to the segment that we're going to do right now, the Get to Know Your FO, Get to Know Your Front Office segment. Each week, we're going to introduce you to another member of our staff here with the Belleville Senators. Our offices are inside the Quinte Sports and Wellness Center on the second floor. And our first guest this week is our social media coordinator extraordinaire. Alex, what is your title?
It's Digital Marketing Coordinator.
Digital Marketing Coordinator, which means what?
Yeah, so essentially helps just kind of finding digital strategies to really help grow the team, right? So working a lot with the social media side, graphic design, all the trends of marketing and just kind of finding ways to promote the team from a digital side. So
I'm going to get you to hold that thing a little closer to your face there. There you
how about that?
That's perfect.
Perfect.
Excellent. Yeah. And Alex is one of the newer-ish members of our staff. Joined the team, right near the end of last season, right?
Yeah, I kind of came in right at the end of the regular season, but it was good timing. I made it for the playoffs and was able to enjoy that. So it was perfect timing. I think being able to get a few games under my belt before the summer and off season was good. So I wasn't coming into this season without any games, so it was a good time, I think.
You're a Toronto kid, went to University of Guelph, find yourself here in Belleville now. How has this kind of matched up to what you thought coming out of school and diving right into the world of pro hockey?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Just thinking back, it hasn't been long, but it's been a crazy past year. Going into my final year of university, still wasn't sure, like a lot of people, what I wanted to do, but I was able to join a club at Guelph called the Sports Management Association, and that really just opened my eyes to kind of what I wanted to do, and just helped ease that transition from school to career. So I was able to kind of work as a digital marketer for our association, and just kind of fell in love with the idea of working in sports. Obviously, as a kid, and sure a lot of us at this office grew up with sports in mind all the time.
Yeah, of course.
That was a goal. I wanted to be the next McDavid, but that obviously wasn't in the
Didn't
works,
we all?
Didn't
Yeah.
we all? So here I am, and I'm still just trying to keep the dream alive in sports and doing it from the business side, which I've been loving, and it's been a great experience.
You mentioned you were always kind of geared to wanting to work in sports. Was hockey kind of always your first love when it came to working in sports?
Yeah, you know what? I played a lot of sports growing up, hockey, basketball, soccer, but hockey was where my heart was, and I played more competitively in that sport. My whole family did, my sisters, my dad, so definitely fell in love with hockey and kind of rode with that. And as a kid, that was the sport I thought I would grow up playing and playing the rest of my life, but glad I was able to find a job where I could still be around hockey. So,
and I guess kind of looking from the outside and now being inside a professional sports organization, what kind of surprised you, and what kind of were things that you thought you kind of knew but are kind of learning now as you go?
For sure. No, it's eye-opening, for sure. Going into this, I travel with the team, which I never would have expected to be doing. So I think that's where I really get to see the behind the scenes of this whole industry and really get a good taste of that. So being able to travel with the team and just seeing the behind the scenes of how the team operates on the road has been insane. And I'm super grateful that I'm even able to travel with the team, be on the bus with the guys. So that's been awesome. But obviously the back end of everything we do here in the office is crazy. I didn't think this much work was really being put into a sports professional sports team. So it's I really give props to everyone in the sports industry who you don't really see the front side of this, and it's a grind. It's a grind.
It sounds like a cliche, right? Like you hear that all the time. Yeah, it's a grind. I'm grinding away, but until you're in it, and again, especially now that you're traveling as well, you really don't understand, I think, the full scope of what the grind actually means.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
you know, when I started traveling with the Belleville Bulls back in the day and the Petes, you kind of see it a little bit, but it's a completely different level now when you're here with a professional team. And the one thing I always say to people is the amount of work that it takes to make professionals feel like professionals, and I'm talking about the equipment staff and those guys on the road. It's mind-blowing, the commitment that those guys have to their craft. Our equipment manager, Matt Mitchell, his assistant, Mike Boyes, and the entire training staff, Craig Belfer, Kevin Kozai, etc. It's incredible to watch those guys work and to do their thing.
Yeah, and the players are appreciative. They know that they wouldn't be there without everyone else on staff, so it's great just being with everyone and seeing how everyone else contributes to the team to make things go. It's really awesome.
Looking at well, let's ask you some on-ice questions here. You're a hockey guy as well, and you don't get to do as much analysis as Joel and I, but how have you thought the season's gone so far for the team?
Yeah, you know what? It's I'd say streaky, but in a good way. We kind of get to see both sides of things and how we kind of overcome each whether it's a losing streak or a winning streak, and just finding ways. And obviously there's so much movement. I didn't really grow up watching much AHL. Obviously being from Toronto, it's really just watching the Leafs. So I see the NHL, and you don't see too much movement with lineups and guys going up and down, but this league is a whole other level in terms of that, where it seems like it's a new roster every game, as we know. But yeah, it's great seeing the team adapt to new players and new systems each game, and I think it's great hockey. Like I love it. Yeah.
As a guy who grew up in Toronto, cheering for the Leafs, admittedly, and I know there's a lot of our fans or hockey fans in Belleville that have this same, we'll call it a dilemma, I suppose. But what's it been like working for the Senators and having to kind of put that blue and white fandom on the back burner?
Yeah, you know what? It was something I definitely thought of when I accepted this job. But it's crazy. My whole family would say, like, "Hey, are you going to be an Ottawa fan now?" I'm like, and I told them at the beginning, I'm always going to bleed blue. But I'm starting to. You know what? It's hard to not cheer for a team you work for, and just seeing all the behind the scenes and what they're going through each day. It's been awesome, and I think I've transitioned a bit. I didn't think I'd ever be this much of an Ottawa and Belleville fan, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really hard not to root for the guys that played here in Belleville and are now up in the NHL, regardless of what team they're from, because there are Belleville Sens grads all over the NHL now. And yeah, that's something that took a little bit for me to figure out, and I really do hope that some of our fans listening, the hockey fans in Belleville that are struggling with that, well, I've grown up liking the Leafs, and the Belleville Sens are Ottawa's farm team. I really hope people can learn to separate that, because that's going to go such a long way in terms of this team keeping its footing here in town and for us growing our fan support. So yeah, and if you can do it and I can do it, anybody can do it.
Oh yeah,
that's
sure.
That's right. All right, the last thing that we're going to do here as part of our first Get to Know Your FO segment is you get to pick who's next. You get to pick who we'll speak with next week. So put your name in the hat, or if you've got somebody on your mind, who would you like to hear from next week?
You know what? I'd say the guy who helped. I kind of helped in my department. He's been working with me quite a lot ever since I started here. I'd love to see Garrett Harvey and just see his perspective of things.
All right.
I feel like he's a good next ballot. So. Garrett Harvey, you're up next.
You're up, G. Garrett Harvey will join us next week. Joel's looking forward to that already, I can tell.
Yeah, that's gonna be one you're not gonna want to miss.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll also have, again, at least one other feature interview. We'll recap you on the 3 games this week, which, again, are Toronto on Wednesday and Friday, and the Hershey Bears here on Saturday. One more reminder, you can get tickets anytime, 24/7 at Ticketmaster.ca, or head to BellevilleSens.com. Check out the promo packs that are on, and again, that's your best value if you're going to come out to a game. We hope to see you this week as the Sens play 3 and then hit the road for another long road trip. Again, thanks to Joel Vanderlaan, Alex Smith for their time. Thanks to you for listening. David Foote saying so long for this week. We'll talk to you next week on the Belleville Sens podcast on the Belleville Sens Entertainment Network.